What's up, guys? Today we're going to do a breakdown of the Volcanist class in Convergence mod version 1.3.2. That's the patch we're on. We're just going to start at the top, go through all the spells, talk about them a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the weapons, the armors, maybe talk about some of its encounters, the ways it deals with certain monsters, and then we'll recap on everything. So, let's get started. This class is the Volcanist, and it uses Lava Sorcery, which is fire damage sorcery, which scales with Int and Faith together. So it scales at the same rate. It's a dual stat class, so that means that with like all the dual stat classes, the weapons that are built around the class are going to scale all the way up to 99 in whatever stats they scale in. Except the spell casting tools, like the staffs or seals, they are going to scale only to 50 of each point, 50 of each stat type. Because this is Int and Faith, it's going to scale up to 50 Int, 50 Faith. This was sort of a design choice that makes it so that the single stat scaling spell types, which scale up to 99 of one single stat, are going to be equal to the power level of a dual stat scale. Like, you know, Lava Sorcery in this case at 50-50 would be equivalent to Glint Sorcery scaling all the way up to 99. The playstyle of the class, it's definitely ranged. It's not focused on necessarily just melee, though it does have some interesting melee tools. Like all the various spell types throughout the mod, there's going to be one of three paths that you can pick with each spell type. You can either go more spell focused, more weapon focused, or a hybrid of the two. And we try to put armor sets in to support all three. Also, we try to put in some spells which try to support, you know, all three of these playstyles to some degree. Some have more tools for one than the other. So to kind of kick things off, Lava Dart is the first spell we're going to be looking at, and the way it works is it shoots a projectile of lava, and it has very good range. And there's a kind of a design element of all the lava sorceries, which is that they have some horizontal range, but they have infinite downward range. And so they fly out, and then gravity will affect them, and then gravity will then pull them to the ground. But they don't just dissipate in the air like some other spells do. They'll literally fall all the way to the ground, no matter how far away the ground is. So I can shoot this up in the air, it goes all the way up, and look, it's going to fall all the way down until it hits something, a little bit too far. And once it hits something, boom, it will turn into a pool of lava way back there in the distance. So a spell like this in particular, Lava Dart, goes extremely far, but especially if you angle it upwards. If you're just aiming flat across a plane, it will still go very far. It's a very good range spell, very strong. So strong, in fact, we've actually had to lower the damage of it some, but definitely a bread and butter spell that will carry like early builds like to the mid game pretty readily, pretty easily. And you can see that the lava pool damage is not insignificant. It definitely helps a lot. So yeah, the first feature is that most lava spells have infinite downward range. The second feature is that they almost all produce a lava pool on the ground wherever they land, which will deal some supplemental damage. It's a useful feature. Okay, the next spell is a vanilla spell, Magma Shot. It works pretty much the same as in vanilla. It takes longer to cast. It doesn't go as far, but it does a lot more damage than Lava Dart. So you cast, you can see the damage is much higher than Lava Dart. And you can full charge for even larger lava pool and also more upfront damage on it. So same thing applies. You can shoot this up in the air, and it will act like a lobbed effect. And you can see that at first glance, Magma Shot doesn't appear very impressive, and that in most situations, just in terms of opportunity cost, you're more interested in using Lava Dart just because of the speed. But there are times where Magma Shot is definitely a better choice, especially before an encounter begins and you're looking to line up some sort of precast. Then Magma Shot can be perfect because you get more damage up front, and then you can immediately switch to Lava Dart and start spamming. Especially if you make the big lava pool, right? Because then potentially they'll be getting hit by the lava darts and lava pool on the ground, and it'll just sort of snowball into this really strong thing. So those are two of your first opening spells. Another one of your earliest spells is the next one, Molten Stride. Now, Molten Stride was a fun one to make, and it's a fun one to use. What happens is, you cast it, and then lava will now emit from wherever you walk. So anywhere you walk, it will leave lava behind. This is amazing. It's extremely effective when your playstyle is more like kiting enemies, right? Where you're trying to move away from them. If you're trying to move away from them, then it is just extremely, extremely good. Because you end up in a situation where you're pulling away from an enemy and then also shooting them with lava dart or whatever it might be. And in that process, enemies are trying to chase you and therefore running into more incidental damage in the form of the lava pools that are generated under your feet. It's surprisingly effective. It's just one of those things that we made as sort of just an idea, then it ended up being like really, really good and really effective. So quite proud of that one. Okay, Burning Rancor. So this one's interesting because we did do a few spells within the design space of really good when you're far away, but not so good when you're up close. And Burning Rancor is definitely one of these type of spells. So like if I go in pretty close to this guy and I shoot a Burning Rancor, all of those projectiles have trouble hitting him. And like from here any closer, same thing. Only one or two might hit him. But if I get really far, it gets much better. The damage on this is quite strong, and considering the cast speed, it's actually like one of your better spells in terms of like FP to damage ratio. It's for sure really, really good, but it can be a bit situational because of the range restriction. And the full charge, just the same thing, just more effective, basically. Overall, great spell, also somewhat situational. You could even set up a scenario where you shoot a Magma Shot initially, get the lava pool, and then while it's in the air, like assuming you like lobbed it up, then you might do a Burning Rancor, and then when that's on the way, you switch to Lava Dart and start spamming, and once again, you create this critical mass of damage burst. So it's in that sense somewhat similar to Dragonkin in the playstyle, except of course it's fire damage, and it definitely has better range. The next spell on the list is Familial Consumption. So this is a buff. Let's take a look here. Oops. Okay. This is kind of keeping in theme with the whole Takers theme, the sort of lore and backstory of Volcano Manor, right? The idea is that they take and that they benefit from, you know, sort of either lives or souls or whatever it might be. Like in Rykard's case, he's taking in all these heroes and therefore becoming more powerful. So Taker's cameo got sort of repurposed to be more powerful for this. And then Familial Consumption essentially is Taker's cameo, but in buff form and spell form. So when an enemy dies, you restore some HP, some FP, and some stamina. And then also, when an enemy dies, you gain 10% additional fire damage to your attacks for 30 seconds. And so this is extremely good. You kill an enemy, and then for 30 seconds afterwards, you have a damage buff. Also, every time you kill an enemy, you get resources replenished, and you can keep that secondary buff up for as long as you're killing enemies within 30 seconds. So it sort of starts out as just being a recovery mechanic, but you can leverage that into extra damage. Extremely good at clearing areas, but obviously very limited use on bosses unless the boss happens to be spawning adds of some kind. And in that case, it's fine. But yeah, so this is kind of a theme you'll see recurring throughout this class, is that there's lots of benefits for killing things, which often is very good, but also often very, very weak in bosses. And because so much of Elden Ring and the Souls experience is sort of centered around bosses in general, that I think that these are kind of balanced because you don't really balance the game necessarily as much around killing trash mobs as much as you do around dealing with bosses, right? So when you have mechanics that are kind of exclusive to trash mobs, then I think you can weight them a little bit heavier in terms of effectiveness. And that's kind of where buffs like this will have their place. So let's see. So yeah, let's just demonstrate that one. So cast it here. All right, see a little buff on my body. There's a guy. And you can see the regen property. And you get the red glowing effect on your body on top of that little orange, so you know that you have the 30-second increase as well for the 10% additional damage. So next we have Lava Spray. This one's basically, if you were to sort of take the initial concept of like Lava Dart or Magma Shot, where you have this almost lobbed projectile where you throw it and then it falls. Lava Spray is essentially taking all of these concepts, like that exact concept, and amplifying it or multiplying it across many projectiles, right? So you shoot it once, it shoots out a whole bunch of them that all lob in a line, almost like a napalm, right? Like a napalm bomb. And then if you full charge, it's more than that. So this essentially is all of your short range and your long range shots in one without necessarily having to aim each and every one of them, right? Very effective, very powerful, but on the slower side for sure. Definitely not infinite opportunities to use this, but definitely really cool when you can. Aim it up in the air and you get long range bombs from the sky. Very satisfying, very fun. Definitely good time to use that. The next spell has been one that has been kind of a sleeper because it is a vanilla spell. And it's a spell that in vanilla people didn't use very much because it was pretty difficult to use and honestly not that great. So Roing Magma, the way that it works is it's the same as Seething Chaos from Dark Souls 3, where you shoot out a projectile and then it sticks to the ground and then it explodes after a duration. And if you hit an enemy directly with the Roing Magma, it'll do less damage and it won't cause the explosion. So we have changed this. The first one is the same, but the full charge, now it shoots 3. Therefore making it more effective, right? It's easier to use, more likely you'll hit something with it. The big downside to spells like this is that it is a time bomb, not a proximity bomb, right? So you literally have to get something to approach the explosion in time in the right moment for them to get hit by it. So in order to compensate for the fact that this spell is kind of inherently unreliable, is that we have cranked the damage. The damage on this spell is huge. It is so big, especially when you're using the triple version of it. The damage is just kind of insane. So I really was willing to give a high power level to this spell because of its the fact that it has the opportunity to be completely ineffective, right? So if you were to hit a boss with the triple on that, the damage is so good. I mean, it's one of the better spells in the game in terms of like burst damage, but also in terms of damage to FP ratio. Next is the vanilla spell Gelmir's Fury. We haven't really changed this one except for the amount of damage it deals. It deals a little bit more damage than in the vanilla version, and the FP cost is a little bit less, so as to make it a little bit more attractive. But we didn't really want to take away from the original theme of the spell that vanilla had to offer. You know, kind of a fountain of lava, a little bit. You know, I would say that even with our improvements to the spell, that it's still on the weaker side. I would say that. And so moving forward, it might be something we'd consider buffing, making it a little stronger, or adding some additional utility to it of some kind. It is a little tricky given the nature of some of our other spells that we've made to make it be effective, but also like have a unique design space, right? Because some of the other spells we may do kind of maybe do what this spell is trying to do, but maybe a little bit better. So it's not always easy to find its proper place, but it's something that we'll continue thinking about in the future. Okay, next is Blasphemer's Outrage, and this is another buff. Let's see. So it's an offensive enchantment, increases all weapon damage by 10%, and reduces weapon stamina cost by 25%, while also lowering defenses by 20%. So typically when you find buffs that are more designed for melee combat, like this one, which you would tend to see as sort of a pattern across the mods, concepts, is that you tend to see is an increase to weapon damage and an increase to defense as well, right? But usually you might also see some kind of detriment to spell casting along with it in order to counterbalance it. This one's counterbalanced differently, right? The idea here is you're giving up defense for more offense, for more weapon-based or melee offense, right? So it's higher risk, higher reward. However, the amount of buff you're getting is 10%, which is more than your typical offensive enchantment. A lot of offensive enchantments don't really get to 10%, especially not this early in the game. So it also has a supplemental effect, which is lowering weapon stamina cost by a lot, by 25%, right? So the power of the offense of this buff has to be counterbalanced by something a little bit more dramatic than just like a loss to some like FP or mana cost or whatever it might be. And so this was one where we're going after something that you actually will care about in terms of downside, which is how much damage you take. But it's still extremely good. If you play a more sort of nuanced style class or a nuanced style build where you're dodging a lot, you're not really getting hit by much, your strafes or you're parrying, then this is awesome. There's almost no downside to it. You just get more damage and more attacks. But obviously, it won't be to everyone's liking. But it is unique, like in that sense, right? Like in terms of like melee buffs, it's the only one really of its kind. All right, next we have Lava Pool. So Lava Pool is kind of what I was talking about earlier with Gelmir's Fury in the same sort of design space, is that it creates a massive AoE around you. It's much faster to cast than Gelmir's Fury. You don't have to hold it. And the pools on the ground last a pretty long time. And then there's more of them if you full charge, right? So you get a little bit of upfront damage, right, when you use it. And then the lava pools take over. Now, obviously, having the little bit of upfront damage, even if it knocks things back, is not a perfect defensive measure. You know, sometimes you're going to be right in the middle of things where it may not be the best place to be standing. But you can definitely use it to set up traps, or you can use it in some situation against large bosses where all those lava pools will really be leveraged to like hit a large hitbox or what have you. Another one just sort of like a volcanic eruption. All right, let's get our next batch. Okay, now we're starting to get into the much more powerful spells. I'm just going to do these 4 because they're getting to the more advanced ones. Rykard's Rancor is a vanilla spell, but we have repurposed it. Well, it's pretty much the same. We've just made it better. We've just improved it. The way it works now is it still creates that sort of snake of particle effects that then sort of heats up and then explodes, right, in the trail that follows it. But the difference is that it lasts much longer, right? So that means it's going to constantly be weaving itself around a lot longer. And the second thing, and the most important thing, is that it will now actually be able to travel through the ground and other collisions and not stop when that happens. Whereas the vanilla version was way shorter, and if it hit anything, it was just done. It finished. So now it's actually like a reliable source of passive damage, or like turret-style damage, which we've talked about in previous videos. Turret-style spells tend to be very, very strong, because once you've casted them, then all opportunity cost for dealing damage is removed. So now you can combine that damage and layer it with other sources, right? So Rykard's Rancor, no different. There it goes. And it's just going to keep on weaving for a while there, traveling through the ground and back up again. So it's a lot more similar to the way that it works when Rykard uses it. Still doesn't last quite as long as Rykard's, but it's much, much better than it used to be. But it is an interesting style of turret, because it's a style of turret that kind of wants you to be close to the enemy when you first cast it, because its duration also is subject to travel time. So if you're close when you first cast it, then more explosions will appear on the thing for a longer period of time. So it's really interesting because it is ranged, but the further you are away, the less damage opportunity it's going to have to explode things. And obviously there's a delay on it, you know, before they go off, so enemies can move out of that. It's a situation where I am very happy with its current design space and like what it does. However, in terms of improvement in the future, I might consider extending the duration yet again, because I think it would be more satisfying. But even if it meant lowering each individual damage tick that it's able to do a little bit, because I think it would be more in keeping with what Rykard uses in the boss fight, and I like that when it's a more perfect reflection between what the boss does and what the player can do with the same spell. And so it's just something I've thought about that I might end up doing for this spell. The next one is Pyroclasm. Pyroclasm is essentially Rykard's Phase 1 lava wave that goes along the ground. It has extremely long range. It has a pretty good spread. When you full charge it, it actually doubles the spread radius, so you get a lot more width out of the spell. Another thing is that it will knock down buildings, which was a fun little thing we added. So it's actually capable of knocking down destructible objects. Really good for clearing trash mobs. Definitely a lot less good for killing bosses, though, because in terms of damage to mana to how long it takes to cast, it doesn't really line up that well against a lot of bosses. Some bosses I think it's fine, but it's really just a lot better for killing trash. You'll notice, once again, we're kind of back to that theme where lava is so good at killing trash mobs, but it's not always the best for killing bosses. It's plenty good for killing bosses, but it seems to have this focus on like AoE killing little things. The whole volcanic eruption, like it's kind of in keeping with this theme that volcanoes are kind of random by nature, right? And they're kind of big, but not very precise, right? And so that is in keeping with the theme. Big, bold effects, you know, sweeping stuff, but it's not that great at focusing in, which I thought fit the theme very well and also sort of acted as a balancing measure to a certain degree. Next, we have Lava Blast. Okay, so this spell went through several iterations, and I'm not 100% sure that the iteration that it is right now is exactly what will stay. So Lava Blast is essentially, it's almost like a mini Comet Azure. It's a channeled spell, and it just shoots a whole bunch of lava out. And each one doesn't do very much damage. And then also each one makes a lava pool, and each one of those doesn't do very much damage either. It's a tricky spell to balance because if you adjust... If something shoots a whole bunch of like machine gun style bullets and then you increase it by 1, sometimes because there's so many, all of a sudden now that's way too strong. And then you decrease it by 1 and all of a sudden now it's way too weak. So it's a tricky one to get it just right. And when we first made it, it was way too much and then it was way too little. And now it's sort of climbing its way back up slowly. So I'm expecting that the spell will probably climb up to a sweet spot within, you know, the next few balancing patches, next few iterations. So you can see here that like I'm shooting an enemy that is not very strong, one of the weakest enemies there is, right? One that I was almost like doing more than half of their HP with one lava dart. And you can see that it takes several hits from Lava Blast in order to kill them. So as it is right now in terms of design space, that's a little weak. It's a little on the weaker side, especially considering the FP that it costs. But sometimes, you know, it's just one of those things I think that, you know, within a patch or two, this will probably be in a really good spot. It's just an easy spell to overtune. Okay. Next spell is Lava Bomb. So another one in the same design space as Burning Rancor, in that it's very bad close range, but extremely good at long range. The big difference, though, is that Rancor requires you to have kind of a lot of space in front of you so that the individual skulls can have space to spread out and then close back in. Whereas Lava Bomb is asking that you have enough space above you because it can hit the ceiling or it can hit stuff on the way back down. But neither one is very good at hitting stuff up close, right? But they're both very good at hitting stuff that's far away. So I take this wolf, I shoot a Lava Bomb up in the air. See, it hit the top of the tent. Perfect example. Now, here's the upside to Lava Bomb, is that it does make lava that falls out in all directions and could very easily still hit the thing you're trying to hit. But in terms of sniping stuff from far away, this spell is absolute perfection. It's exactly what you want for sniping. It's, once again, pretty tough to use in most boss fights, especially if the boss is trying to close distance on you, which a lot of them do. Not all of them. But see, even there, I missed him because he was coming in too close too fast. I wouldn't even be able to hit him from here with Lava Bomb. They need to be far in order for it to work effectively. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's see, next few spells. So here we get to the end game level of spells, these 4. Alright, first up is Vortex of Eay. So this spell is the flashiest dot that we have ever made. It is effectively just a dot. A damage over time spell. And damage over time spells tend to be very subtle. You know, you put a curse on them or a debuff, and they might have some visual and their life ticks down. And I thought, hey, why do we have to build it that way? We don't have to build it that way. So I cast it, whoop, it puts a thing up in the air, it forms a vortex in the sky, and thousands of skulls come out and descend upon the thing that you were locked onto when you first cast it. And the skulls, so it actually goes in multiple phases. The way that this works is that the skulls come out of the vortex as large skulls, and then they fly around in kind of random directions, and then they break and they split into 3 little skulls. And then the little skulls go down and attack the actual enemy. Now, the way that it works is that each skull does a very small amount of damage, but they just keep trying to hit it. But the spell is not capable of hitting an enemy more than every so often. They're only allowed to hit it like maybe once a second or something. So that means that the other skulls that can't hit it just keep swarming the thing. And so the cool thing about a design like this is that it allows for the actual projectiles to be the visual element. Rather than having to put a visual special effect on the enemy, you can just see the skulls spinning around the thing so you know that it's still being chased by damage, right? So, once again, it's just a dot. And you can only have one vortex active at a time. And so you can't really spam it very effectively. In a previous patch, there was a problem that was actually allowing it to be spammed, which was a mistake, but we fixed it. So I think of it as a combat opener. It's good against bosses. It's one of the few things that this class has that's extremely effective against bosses. So much of what the Volcanist does is counterbalanced by the fact that the FP costs might be higher or the casting speed might be slower because it has such incredible AoE potential. So things are balanced around the idea that it's going to be hitting in an area. But that counterbalancing is not effective against most bosses. So you end up paying a premium just to try to get some damage out there that you're not really getting much out of the premium, if that makes sense. So Magma Missile is basically Lava Dart, except in-game. It does a massive explosion on impact that causes huge lava pools and does huge damage. It can obscure your vision a bit, and this was absolutely an intentional design choice that the release of the spell is kind of in your face, because the spell is incredibly, incredibly powerful. It's so fast and so much damage that we had to do a lot of work to make sure that the cost of it was high enough that you really couldn't spam very many of these. Because if you could spam a whole lot of them, then every single thing in the game would be trivialized. You know, just take the act of doing that spell. It's really, really, really effective, right? So definitely one we had to be very careful with balancing. And I actually do think it's in a good place. You can only cast a few of these. You'd have to really do a lot of work to reduce your FP costs or get enough mine together to be able to make this spammable. But you can. You can still do that. And I think that that's a fair reward. If you spent the time to get enough resources together or enough resource production together and you can spam this, then you should be able to. But by default, you really won't be able to. Okay, Inferno, one of the more fun spells that we designed. So you take your Gelmir's Fury and amplify it. So this spell has a lot of layers going on. What's happening here is when you first plunge the staff down into the ground, there is an explosion, which will knock enemies away. Then a lava pool forms around you, which will deal damage to anything in it. And then a whole bunch of essentially roiling magma bullets come out, and they fling in all directions. And then they sit on the ground for a moment and then explode, just like ordinary roiling magma. And then after that, they leave individual lava pools behind, just like roiling magma. So it's a lot going on. And the damage is quite absurd. Kind of like how roiling magma's damage is quite absurd. So it's melee range. It costs a lot. It's pretty slow. So because of all of these downsides, it does a ton of damage, right? It's only fair that it does. If you're willing to go in there and stand toe-to-toe with a big enemy or a boss or a whole bunch of enemies, then it's only fair that it would do a lot. And it's really fun. Alright, so your perma buff for this class is called Embrace the Devourer. Legendary enchantment. Gain an effect that adds 1% additional HP, FP, and stamina, and 1% additional damage every time an enemy dies. This ability stacks up to 10 times. This effect never expires. We're kind of back to the main theme now, right? The Taker's theme. You kill something and you get a buff. This one is pretty special, though, because each level of this buff is permanent, right? It doesn't go away unless you die or warp, okay? So this spell is really good and can also be used on bosses, assuming you've killed 10 things before fighting the boss and you haven't initiated a loading screen in between killing the 10 things and fighting the boss. So still has some conditionality around it. The other thing about this spell is that if you gain your 10 stacks, go into the boss, and then die, now you have no stacks. So you can get your buff back, but it takes a little bit of work. This was the way in which the spell was balanced. So most permabuff spells that we've made, or most legendary enchantments, are they have a kiss curse mechanic, right? That's where it gives you something, but it takes something away. This one has no curse. It's just kiss. It's giving you nothing but positive. So in order to balance that, we needed to make it the conditionality actually have some real weight to it. And so the conditionality is you have to have killed stuff, and if you want it to be a maximum efficiency every single time, then you have to kill stuff. It's the only way I feel like when there's things that are purely positive, you have to have some kind of mechanics that govern it in some way. Otherwise, it can just outclass like all the rest of the permabuffs. And this one's pretty nice because it is all upside, but definitely it's not the easiest to maintain, right? There's some situations where loading screens are somewhat unavoidable. You know, what if you have to go upgrade your weapon, for example, right? Then you're going to lose it. And that's just the nature of it. That's how we, kept it in line. But if you think about what this does, it's very, very strong. It's very, very strong. I mean, 10% more HP, 10% more FP, 10% total stamina, and 10% extra damage. At its maximum, this is insane. Like, this is so strong. I'm very pleased with it because I feel like the power level it incentivizes using the mechanic, and the mechanic is annoying enough that you don't always want to refill it every time. It definitely puts you in that spot where you're weighing your options, and that was the purpose, and I think that that's been executed here pretty well. Alright, so that's the spells. Now let's talk about some weapons. I'm going to focus on the weapons that we have added that are not necessarily vanilla weapons because those are mostly the same as vanilla. So the two that we have made that are purely for lava are the Seething Flail, which is basically a flail made of lava. I would say that this weapon, right now it is just kind of a normal basic flail, and it has a cool model for sure, but it doesn't have anything really cool in terms of mechanics because right now it just uses spinning chain, for example. So originally, when we made this weapon, it had a different concept in mind in terms of like its weapon art, like the weapon skill. But flails are really strange to work with, and the animations need to be written in such a way that that chain is accounted for. So making new ones that actually work is really hard. So right now, spinning chain is a placeholder. It's not going to be the final version, and we're going to keep our eye on this. We might even give the weapon some different normal attacks, so to speak, to sort of compensate for the fact that its weapon art its weapon skill is a little bit lackluster, just in the interim until we get the technical details sorted out. But it's a really cool looking weapon. It has a really cool concept. It's just not, I wouldn't say fully done yet. Let's see. Next is the Lodestone of Gelmir. This was one of the first colossal weapons we added, and we added it pretty recently, a recent patch. So it is inspired by the weapon that existed in Dark Souls 3, the Demon Axe in Dark Souls 3. It's not exactly the model from Demon Axe. We had to make a new model because this is for Elden Ring, so we had to make everything new. But we were very inspired by that concept, by that design. And it definitely does look lava-ish. It looks like an axe that is made of lava. So this weapon uses a relatively normal colossal moveset. And then its weapon art is Magma Crush. Right, so for this moveset, we kind of combined a couple of different ideas here. So one is Spinning Slash, which a lot of weapons have, except we added the portion like the lava blade, the magma blade has, where you do a Spinning Slash, but it spews lava in all directions. So we kept that, but then we added this second part, where essentially you leap up into the air, and when you do, you get that effect from Roing Magma on the weapon, and then when it connects with the ground, the Roing Magma explodes. So it's it's all these sort of lava things coming together in one weapon. The damage is extremely good. which you probably have noticed, this class does not shy away from high damage. Really, it's a class that's about high damage, large AoE, but also high cost, right? And not always the fastest or simplest way to do things. Sometimes, yes. It's kind of a mishmash of different ideas, but it has solid themes. Lava pools on the ground, the lob mechanic, eruptions from where you're standing. It kind of has support from multiple different playstyles within it, because it does sort of cherry pick pieces, right? And the reason why we did it that way is that we wanted to encapsulate this concept of chaos, right? Like, volcanic explosions are inherently chaotic. You don't know exactly the way in which it's going to work. Lava sometimes flows, sometimes it flies, sometimes it explodes. And we wanted to sort of represent all these different aspects of, like, the behaviors of lava in a spell class. And so that means that it's not necessarily going to have a super unified suite of tools, right? The tools feel a little bit, well, this might be good here, this might be good there. And that actually does, I think, make for more creative gameplay dynamics, personally. That's how I feel about it. And as long as we're in keeping with that theme, right, then I think it works conceptually. I really do enjoy this class. I think it has really amazing visuals. I think Vortex is one of the coolest looking spells. I think that for me, it's so fun to play that I almost don't mind some of the parts of it that are difficult to deal with, like the high FP costs of things, because I just enjoy it so much. I just really like it. So, okay, so let's talk about armors. So right now I am wearing... Oh, almost forgot. The Man Serpent Shield is the shield that's going to boost damage of magma sorceries by 10%. So there's always some kind of offhand either weapon or shield or something that we've added that'll increase each damage type, or each spell damage type. And the Man Serpent Shield is the one for this class, which is in Volcano Mana. Okay, so that, and then, so armors. We've got... Right now I'm wearing the more pure spellcaster themed tier 2 armor, which is the Consorts set. So the all the pieces except for the chest are going to add 2 to int and faith, reduce the cost of sorcery, FP cost of sorceries by 2%, and increase damage by 1%. This one's interesting because it's adding more int faith than some other pure caster types, and increasing less magma sorcery of other pure caster types. This was really just to add variety to the different tier 2 sets. Also, it gives us more room if we ever wanted to add a second pure caster style set as well. Another one of the sets for this class is the Hoslo set. So int and faith by 2, and reduces weapon stamina cost by 2, and increases weapon fire damage by 1. So this is your melee oriented. It's not designed... It's really designed to be used for weapons and a lot less for spells. And then there's the hybrid piece, which is the Gelmir Knights. The Gelmir Knights set is the hybrid, where you're going to get some stats, and you're also going to get some just increase all fire damage, right? So it's increasing spells and weapons. So what that tends to do is it means that the buffs on it are a little less, because it is increasing the whole thing. It's increasing all fire damage. But yeah, so I tend to be a player who prefers going for either pure caster or pure melee. I don't hybridize as much, but I definitely do sometimes. So especially if I'm doing like showcase, videos and stuff. But yeah, so those are the 3 for now. We'll probably add more. It's even possible that Hoslo set might get repurposed at some point to be aberrant, because there's definitely some argument in terms of lore and theme that they could easily be aberrant, even though Dialos did join Volcano Manor. It's kind of a weird one. They never really explicitly say in the lore what sort of theme the House Hoslo might have. So it's kind of up to us to sort of decide, like, okay, this goes here, like, on the board. And so, like, that's something I've definitely concerned myself with in the past. And I can see the argument for aberrant. I could see potentially an argument for Blood Flame. And, of course, the argument for Volcano Manor is another one. But yeah, that's one we could end up moving around at some point. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so in terms of like boss fights and the way you're going to handle it with this class is, obviously it comes down to which particular playstyle. But the class is super good at kiting. It is. It's really good at playing keep away. It can dish out decent damage. It can sort of create virtual dots with things like Magma Stride, Lava Pools, and Vortex of Eay without ever actually using an actual dot. Upfront damage can be fine as long as you find a way to have sustainability of your FP. which is always going to be the challenge if you're going pure caster. For hybrid builds, this class the sky's the limit for this class. You have plenty of good buffs, you have recovery mechanics in killing enemies, you have buffing effects for killing enemies, you have all kinds of great stuff going on for hybrid. And, you know, just in general, it's also, I think, the best class at clearing trash mobs. Like, it's probably the best one, because it has so many things that benefit specifically from doing that act, whereas other classes don't really have that. It definitely has a few spells in its toolkit that are designed for focused single target damage. Right now, one of them is on the weaker side, right? So it was the Lava Blast was sort of the tool that was designed for, okay, this is for bosses, we're going to focus them down single target. But it was way too strong before, and now it's on the weaker side. So once we get that one tuned up, then it will have this even better specific tool for killing bosses, assuming you can stand still, which, you know, you can't always do in every situation, right? But yeah, I'd say overall it's pretty well rounded. It can handle whatever because it has a wide range of tools with different areas of effect and different cast speeds. It can kind of do it all. But it doesn't really specialize. You know, that's sort of the downside. There might be something where you're looking for something to really specialize in a specific situation, and yeah, Lava can't really do that. You know, it's good at kind of a little bit of everything. So yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like the class it's one of the most fun to play. It's very flashy. It has a lot of really cool visual effects. The progression is definitely deeply tied to Volcano Manor, and so that can be sort of a detriment for some people, having to do Volcano Manor and Tanith quest lines. You know, like trying to get a hold of this set, meaning you have to kill Rykard for it. It can definitely be a downside, but the class overall, the spell class, is, I would say, on the stronger side. So I was aware when we were designing the class that you were kind of going to be confronted with situations where you're going to have to be like killing stuff that's strong against fire damage in order to complete the progression. So I figured in order to sort of counterbalance that to a certain degree, that I would make the spells pretty strong. You know, good range, good damage, good AoE, all of these things. So it, like I say, it kind of has it all going on, assuming you can get your FP managed. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Volcanist. So thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be back with a Volcanist playthrough soon. Probably be uploading that video next. And also check out our Patreon and all that good stuff. So thanks everyone for chilling, and I'll see you next time.